Welcome to Pushback. I'm Aaron Maté, doing here now a quick recap on the Mueller hearings, which has just wrapped up. I'll be doing more on this, but I wanted to give you my rapid response to what we saw, to what I think is the final iteration of Mueller time. And, I'll just start by saying that for people watching this will probably know that I'm one of a small number of people on the left who were vocally saying for over 2 years that the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory was baseless, and that relying on it and relying on Mueller to validate it was a massive gift to Trump and stood to help Trump's re-election chances, by channeling our energy into a conspiracy theory and the hopes that this former FBI director, Mueller, will validate it, instead of looking and focusing on Trump's actual policies and trying to learn the lessons from 2016 and the real reasons for why he won, and then handing Trump a further gift when the conspiracy theory collapses and the Democrats who made this the top issue of the presidency look foolish. And I think Mueller's appearance today underscores just what a catastrophe this has been. He offered nothing new. The only bombshell that he appeared to offer was one he had to retract when it appeared that he was saying early on when he was speaking to Congressmember Ted Lieu that he would have indicted Trump if not for the OLC memo, which says you can't indict a sitting president. Mueller then, when he began his Intelligence Committee testimony, he clarified that to effectively retract that statement, which I think is another very apt encapsulation of Russiagate, a seeming bombshell that incriminates Trump then has to be retracted. How many times did we see that happen? Mueller appeared unfamiliar with the contents of his report. NBC News counted 198 times that he either declined to answer questions or deflected. And in terms of what he answered and what he didn't answer, it was inconsistent. So, he was asked, for example, why he didn't indict Joseph Mifsud, which is one of the questions that I really wanted to see asked, because Joseph Mifsud is the predicate for the Trump-Russia probe, because Mifsud supposedly told Trump campaign volunteer George Papadopoulos that the Russians might have damaging information on Hillary Clinton, which they might release. And when the FBI received a tip that Papadopoulos had heard that's when they opened up, we're supposed to believe, that's the official explanation, that's when they opened up the Trump-Russia investigation. But then in the Mueller report, Mueller insinuates that Mifsud has Russia connections. He leaves out the fact that Mifsud has actual Western connections. And he also leaves out an explanation as to why he didn't indict Mifsud. A, if Mifsud actually was a Russian agent, and B, because Mueller says that Mifsud lied to him. And given that other people were indicted for perjury, like George Papadopoulos and Michael Flynn, it was puzzling, to say the least, that Mueller didn't indict this central figure, in fact, the central figure of the Russia probe, Joseph Mifsud, for perjury. And when he was asked about this a couple of times, he basically refused to answer and said, I can't get into that. But he could get into a few other things. And by the way, a few other things that he did get into actually debunked the Trump-Russia conspiracy further. So, for example, one of the big things that we're supposed to believe is that Russia has compromat on Trump. That's the premise of the Steele dossier. It's also been, the subject of speculation beyond Steele, because Trump is supposedly compromised by financial interests in Russia, which they can use as leverage over him. Well, Mueller said that over the course of the investigation, he did not find any evidence of any compromat that Russia has on Trump. There was this wild story that was really taken seriously. It was in the Atlantic magazine. It was in the New Yorker, that the Trump campaign through a server had communicated with Alpha Bank, a bank in Russia, and the insinuation or like the speculation there was that that's how possibly the two sides were sending secret messages to each other. It sounds crazy, especially now to say it. I mean, it's always sounded crazy, but it's especially crazy now that we have some distance from the Russia investigation. But this was taken seriously. There's a long piece in the New Yorker, a lot of segments, of course, on MSNBC, and a lot of people who really thought there was something there. Mueller shot that down today. He was asked if his investigation was ever curtailed in any way. He said no, which again underscores to me why this effort to build an obstruction case is difficult, because you might be able to show intent on Trump's part, but the problem with intent is then you get into the question of whether he had legitimate grounds for wanting to impede the investigation, given that, as Mueller recognized, there was no underlying crime in terms of a Trump-Russia conspiracy. And he also said that no one ever instructed him not to look into Trump's finances. And that, again, goes back to this belief that, Trump is compromised by Russian money, and Mueller is going to, find that out. But then when Mueller didn't come up with anything on that front, it was speculated that he was told not to go there, and he didn't. But Mueller shot that down. He said no one ever told him not to look at his finances. And then when he was asked whether he ever got Trump's tax returns, which I can say that somebody who I consider quite knowledgeable told me a while ago that Mueller actually did get Trump's tax returns, although it's never been publicly confirmed. Mueller declined to answer that, which personally I took as a yes. But Mueller, I think the report gave the Democrats the best that they could possibly get in listing all these contacts between Trump associates and people with Russian passports, or people who claim to know people who have Russian passports. Even though, of course, in all these cases, there's not a single actual Kremlin representative offering any assistance to the Trump campaign, because there's actually barely any Kremlin representatives. There's only a Russian ambassador and a Kremlin assistant who's declining the overtures by Michael Cohen, who was then on the Trump then with the Trump organization and with the Trump campaign, who's asking for the Kremlin's help in trying to build Trump Tower in Moscow, which got rejected, which I'll return to, because it's funny, Democrats hold that up as something somehow damning on Trump and proof of collusion, when in fact the only interaction there between Trump and the Kremlin in trying to build Trump Tower in Moscow is the Kremlin saying, sorry, we cannot help you. And that's it. But of course, Adam Schiff ignored all that today. So Mueller wouldn't answer the question about Mifsud. He wouldn't answer any questions really about Steele and whether or not he interviewed Glenn Simpson, who was the head of the firm Fusion GPS, which produced the Steele dossier. Republicans, I think, fairly pointed out that the Russian lawyer in the Trump Tower meeting was working with Fusion GPS and met with Glenn Simpson before and after that meeting. I'm not asserting that there's a direct link there, but I do think it's a line of inquiry worth pursuing at least. And Mueller wouldn't say that he did, which again speaks to a lack of curiosity, I think, on the part of Mueller and his team to get to the actual facts of the Russia investigation. He signaled he didn't even write his own statements. So when he was asked by Louis Gohmert and I think somebody else who wrote his May 29th news conference statement and who wrote his letter to Barr, he said, I'm not going to get into that. He wouldn't just say, I wrote it, which to me says that he didn't write his own statements, which, fuels this speculation, which I think was reinforced today, that Mueller was not really driving this investigation, that a lot of it was delegated to the people underneath him who drove this. And I think that his performance today gives us reason to take that speculation seriously. And then meanwhile, we have, another aspect of the Russia investigation that those of us on the left always thought was so dangerous, that in the process of theorizing that Trump conspired with Russia, it came with this upsurge on the part of Democrats, all of a sudden making, I'm sorry about that, all of a sudden making Russia an enemy again. There was one Democratic lawmaker who said that the alleged Russian interference through social media ads and through stolen emails was an invasion. Adam Schiff called it the most serious attack on our democracy by a foreign power in our history. And Robert Mueller sort of catered to that by talking about what a threat this was. He said that Russia is going to do this again. Although, of course, we're not even sure what they're supposed to do again. Are they supposed to post juvenile clickbait again? That Mueller had to admit has nothing to do with the Russian government, because that was one thing that he was rebuked for recently in a court of law. Are they going to steal emails again? They never specify what this supposed Russian interference is. And of course, before the 2018 midterms, they told us the same thing. That Russia was going to interfere, which of course never materialized. So, there are all these things, and I'm going to get into it more in the coming days as we cover here on Pushback the Mueller probe. But I just think this thing underscored what a giant dud this was, what a mistake it was to channel the anti-Trump resistance into a conspiracy theory. And, you know, Adam Schiff had said before the report, before the Mueller hearing, that the goal was to bring the Mueller report to life. And I think that's exactly what happened. The Mueller report was a dud. There was no Trump-Russia conspiracy, and that's why there were no Trump-Russia conspiracy indictments and no claims or evidence of any actual conspiracy between Trump and Russia inside the report. And for those who actually care about beating Trump and who care about mounting a real opposition to Trump, and also just care about, you know, following basic standards of evidence, which is especially important if you're a journalist, I can't think of a bigger reminder of what a catastrophe Russiagate has been on all those fronts than Robert Mueller's appearance today. And we'll be talking about that more in the coming days on Pushback. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks for joining me.